Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is going to be a neighborhood walk-around garden tour. We've been doing a few of these recently. We have, from about 3 weeks ago when we did the last one, there's a lot of new things out in the in and around the neighborhood that are in full bloom. Some other things that have already passed by. It's such an early season this year. Shooting this the last day of February, and it's incredible that we have things that are blooming out already and coming into flower, so early this year. But this Pieris is kind of right on time. This is pretty normal for Pieris to just kind of open as soon as you get any moderate temperature, any moderation of the nighttime temperatures during the winter time. This is mountain snow Pieris. We showed off Temple Bells Pieris in the last little tour video we did here at the house. And this thing is just spectacular in comparison. It has a perfect form. When we put this thing in, I didn't realize how dry this back line is on the property, and it is really, really dry. And we didn't water it quite enough. It lost some foliage. It was thin. I was like, oh, should I just go ahead and replace it? But I gave it a season, gave it a little more water, and it really has responded incredibly well. So it's just absolutely covered in these little dangling racemes of flowers, ericaceous type flowers like you'd see on blueberries. Super showy white. They're not all open yet, so it's not as showy as it's going to be. These are just in the process of forming and opening. And then after that, shortly after that, it will get a flush of really bright red foliage on it. Just a great four-season plant, and obviously evergreen. It had its leaves on it all winter long. Hellebores just everywhere. Won't show off any hellebores in this video other than the first one here in the garden in Raleigh. But there's hellebores all over the neighborhood that are absolutely in full bloom. And then there's a pulmonaria down here that's definitely getting started a little bit early. And we saw this over at Juniper Level Botanic Garden last week too, that a lot of these early, this is an early blooming perennial, but I wouldn't expect it to be blooming in February. But that is this pulmonaria works really well, surprisingly well back here in this dry shade space. So some of the hosta that we initially tried back here and a couple of the other perennials just got smaller in time. May apples, anything that needed moist shade conditions. So what we've come back in here with is hellebores and rhodia, cast iron plants. The shrubs are pretty drought tolerant once they're established, but I would have thought that pulmonaria would have been in the group of it wouldn't have liked the dry shade conditions, but it's done just fine. The last time we did a walk around, the star magnolias were in full bloom, and there's a few of those that still have some lingering flowers on them, but most of them are pretty much done at this point. The saucer magnolias have really taken over now, and there are lots and lots of them in the neighborhood, and some of them have really been allowed to take their true form and become small trees. If you ever get a chance this time of year into February into middle March to go to the Ralston Arboretum, there's an incredible collection of deciduous magnolias over there. I have taken lots of photos over there in the past. It's an amazing collection. It's an amazing collection of magnolias, period, evergreen and deciduous magnolias. But this is one that I've walked the dogs under for years now. I walk under this tree every morning, and it comes into flower like this. These will eventually fall onto the ground, and the ground will be covered in these colors. Of course, most of these are pretty fragrant, and there's lots and lots of different varieties of these hybrid saucer magnolias. Some of them will also, some of them like Jane and some of the ones with women's names will continue to throw off some blooms into the summer and into the fall as well. And we've got one of those at the corner near the house, and when it's in full bloom, we'll show it off later in the season. This is another fun place we walk through pretty frequently. This is JC Park. It's been here for a long time. Came here when I was a kid. There's a daylily display here. The Daylily Society has a planting here. It's not worth looking at right now. The daylilies are just breaking the ground, but you can come here, and they have plaques on all of them, all the named hybrid varieties of daylilies. It's actually really pretty neat. And you can come over a pretty long span and see lots of them, and lots of them blooming. There's hundreds, a couple hundred down there. This is a plant that's kind of fallen out of favor somewhat. These kind of larger growing weeping spireas, I think you'd see a lot more of them in the north, but we used to also see a lot of them here, but they've definitely fallen out of favor for more leafy evergreen options that have been added to the landscape. But when they're in bloom and they're allowed to grow into their big, weeping forms, all of these larger growing spireas are quite beautiful. This is Spirea thunbergii. We'll see prunifolia as well, which is the bridal wreath spirea, which is typically double. And then there's a single version of it too. But this is the single flowering thunbergii here. But it's super, super colorful. When it's coming out like this, the foliage looks great on it early in the season. It's kind of a lime green, lanceolate, little narrow leaf on it. Again, allowed to grow into its full form, on a larger property like this. They look absolutely fantastic, but again, we just don't see many. I don't see many. There used to be more dwarf spireas and large growing spireas, and we could walk blocks and blocks and blocks and not see a single spirea anymore. But again, it looks great when they're in full bloom. Also here in the city park is this incredible planting of daffodils that have over time filled in more and more space. And again, I want you to take a look at, they're all facing toward where Steph has the camera, because the sun is rising over here in the southeast and it'll set in the southwest this time of year, and that's the direction they face. Not a one of them's facing the parking lot behind it. They're all facing back toward the building where the sun is rising this morning. Here's a parking lot along Oberlin Road in Raleigh that convinced Steph and I that serviceberry was the right tree for the front, the garden at the house, because that lot is so small, we really can't have a lot of trees that will get any size on them. This is a smaller growing ornamental tree, but it's still going to get some size to it. But these were the ones that made us decide that we definitely wanted an amelanchier from a very long list that we were picking from, because during COVID, during the shutdown, we would walk around the city looking and talking about plants, and these serviceberries were absolutely loaded with fruit, more than the birds could eat. Usually you're competing with the birds to eat them. And we came through here several days in a row and just loaded up on serviceberries, which are absolutely fantastic. They're fantastic fruits. Again, it's in the rose family. It sometimes has some issues. You don't get a lot of fruit for various reasons. And then of course the birds are always going to be competition for you to get them. But if you do, the serviceberries you do get, they're blueberry sized, shaped, and colored, but actually tastier to me. They're unbelievable. It's an unbelievable fruit. I wish it had some sort of shelf life and some commercial, viability where you could buy these off the shelf in the grocery store. But this is the tree that convinced us that a serviceberry was right for us. These crepe myrtles along Clark Avenue in Raleigh, next to a giant apartment building. It's a very, very busy corner. I'm sure there's all kinds of background noise as I'm talking here. But these crepe myrtles get cut like this every winter, which is, I guess, if you're going to have crepe myrtles on a standard like this, the size of them has to be somewhat controlled. Otherwise they're going to get too big. Eventually, the developer, the landscaper's probably going to take these out anyway. There's a time limit on large trees in small spaces, but these also have another time limit on them, as you're absolutely covered in crepe myrtle scale. Here you can see the scale on the side of the trees, and there's the black there's a black stain on the tree as well from last year, where the sooty mold formed from these scale insects, basically their poo. We've shown this in a couple videos recently, but I want to show the scale of this. I mean, it's virtually every crepe myrtle in the city of Raleigh is under attack. Steph thinks these look like Dementors from Harry Potter, the way they're shaped now. What do you think? It's got that little cloud of mist behind it where the stems that are left from their crazy pruning. This is a corner we pass all the time where they've used cotoneaster as or some people say cottoneaster. I used to have people ask me for cottoneaster when I was at the farmer's market, but cotoneaster, it's a great use of cotoneaster on this bank. It'll flower in a few weeks. This is another rose family member. Occasionally they can get issues. The owner walking through, who's been super, super nice to let us film in front of his house, and then it will form a red berry on them, which can linger through the winter. Really has kind of a similar flower and berry pattern to pyracantha, but it's not as, it won't bite you as much as pyracantha will. But it has this, it's just a great use for it on this bank. We see all kinds of things being used on slopes and banks in this neighborhood, junipers, liriope, all kinds of ornamental grasses. But the cotoneaster here has always looked really good. This is the thinnest part. It's a little thicker on the other side where it's getting a little more sun. But I wanted to step here because we wanted to show you this Deodar cedar that's up here above my head. This one I've always admired. It used to be really, really wide when the new owner took the house. The tree person recommended that they limit up some because some of the lower branches were in jeopardy. But I talked about in a Deodar cedar video not that long ago that what happens with these is at a certain height, they seem to lose the top. And then they start getting all of these extra leaders up there. And that's just pretty true of any of the ones I see with any age on them, is they're initially a single leader tree, kind of Christmas tree shaped, and then ultimately end up, you know, with all of these leaders. And there's another one over here to the right that has a similar habit as well. Same thing happened. At some point, the top died out of it. Something happened to it that stopped that central leader, and then all kinds of new leaders formed up in it. But interesting, there seems to be a height cap on them that they can get to. But they are pretty trees. You can see around the corner from where we were, where I think it's getting a little more afternoon sun in the summertime, how much fuller it is and how many more flowers, and then therefore these red berries were on it through the winter time. And this does a great job of holding this bank in place with very, very little maintenance. They're just coming along here at the bottom once a year and cutting out the bottom. I might, brave this occasionally and take out a few spiky pieces and cut them back, but that would be about it. Other than that, there's really just no maintenance on this. It's kind of funny how plants come in and out of favor. We talked about the spirea earlier in the video that used to be, just far more common, just all different types of dwarf and large growing spirea. Same thing is true on that cotoneaster. When they remodeled this house, this was a frat house for some period of time, and the person bought it and then had to, pretty much gut it to put it back to normal. But when they got to this section of kind of redoing the area, this bank needed to be replanted, and they couldn't find a cotoneaster anywhere to match that up. So they used these abelia. And I had a consultation a couple days ago, and I talked about the use of, don't discount using low doming shrubs. I even think I included in a Q&A a week or two ago. Don't discount the value of low growing spreading shrubs for ground cover like this. I think we only think of things that only get 12 inches tall or whatever, but these abelia are doing an absolutely fantastic job. I believe this was one of the variegated varieties, but it's very shady over here, and abelia is super adaptable, but it's lost a lot of its variegation, but it looked like it did bloom enough during the season that, I'm sure it had some pollinators on it, and it's doing a great job of holding this bank in place. We're over at our friend Rob's, and we've shown this garden off many times. It's got this incredible collection of Camellia japonicas and lots of other interesting plants as well out here in this garden. But we are peak Camellia japonica time on the 29th of February. Happy leap year day to everyone as I'm filming this. But this is one, we don't know the name of this one, or I can recognize a few out here, but they're not tagged or labeled or anything. But I mean, how can you miss with any of these Camellia japonicas? Some of them you'll see variegated ones, double ones, all different kinds of shapes to the flowers, of singles and doubles and peony types, and really interesting. These things are actually kind of heavy. It's really, let me reach down and grab one. It's amazing the amount of energy that a Camellia japonica puts into one of these flowers to make all the flower parts in the middle and all of these individual petals. This thing actually has some mass to it. Kind of amazing the amount of time and energy. These buds are on these Camellia japonicas from probably August. You start to see them, and they form and get bigger and bigger and bigger all winter, and then they open up, and you'll get, the nice thing about them is we'll get an open flower like this, and maybe we get a 29-degree night that, crisp the edge of those flower petals, but look over here. We've got another one that hasn't opened and it'll probably be fine. And then even tighter buds than that on other parts of the plant. Also, you get this really beautiful dark green, shiny foliage on these Camellia japonicas. Quite a bit bigger leaf. You can see that on my hand versus like a Camellia sasanqua, which would have maybe a third the size of a leaf, something like that. These are also going to get big. I mean, almost entirely across the board, the Camellia japonicas are going to become, they'll tree form themselves over time, which is what you're seeing here. This was planted as a small little 3-gallon, I'm sure, or 5-gallon, full to the ground shrub, and over time, as it reaches up into the, reaches up higher, it loses those bottom limbs and becomes really small ornamental trees that then you can tuck things under. So Rob has just a crazy collection of them. And also there's some interesting hellebores out here as well. So thank you guys for watching. We're going to end this video with just a little bit of a video of some of these beautiful camellias in flower here at the end of February. Thanks for watching. Well, this is one I actually do know the name of. This is Jax, Camellia japonica Jax, and perhaps the most perfect of all camellias. It has the kind of the most perfect flower, the kind of most perfect form, foliage, habit in the landscape. Just really has all things that anyone would love about a Camellia japonica. And I did a competition several years ago of people picking their favorites, and this was right near the top of the list for virtually anyone who is familiar with this particular variety.